Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining the session today. We're going to hear about the Innovation Award presentation. So an update about the adaptive card that Dan and Ashley worked on. Just a reminder, if we have time for Q&A at the end, I will monitor the Q&A feature of the platform, and you're welcome to submit your questions to Dan and Ashley. Also, feel free to engage in the chat, and we'll monitor that as well. And then just briefly at the very end, I will kick off a survey. The top 3 rated surveys will be the presenters will be invited to Dev Days in September at the BBCon. Excuse me, they'll be invited to the BBCon event in September in Seattle. So please stay and submit your feedback, and we can give Dan and Ashley the golden ticket to Seattle later in the year. So thanks so much. I'll kick it over to Dan and Ashley.
All right. So I'm just going to get my screen share going here. And hopefully that is working. So let me.
Looks good, Dan. We see it.
All right, perfect. So as Jason said, this is the data update adaptive card. We won from, or I was fortunate to be selected for the Innovation Award last year. I am Dan Snyder. Coming to you from Salem, New York, where I grew up, and I've been at Bennington College for 13 years and power automating for, we'll say, 3. Ashley, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Dan. I've been at Blackbaud for about 16 years now, and my current hometown, I would say, is Butler, Tennessee, so very northeast Tennessee. And power automating for about the same. You need to start adding that as a tag onto here for these, because that is kind of a nice metric to see.
Yeah. So I'm going to just start and say, why this project? So I was inspired by the Innovation Award project from Haley last year. And also a skills lab that was building a power app. We also had a bit of a staff exodus. So in terms of having the time to keep up with all the data updates that we needed to do, I knew I wasn't exactly going to have the time. And one of the key people who was doing a lot of these updates was also going to leave. So that was another impetus for thinking about this, and partly why I wanted to do it without any approval process. Just people could fill out the card and send it right in. So yeah, at the same time, I wanted to maintain some data integrity. So that's where, wanting to put it in an adaptive card, I could control the back end of any updates or changes that needed to be made. But I didn't exactly feel that I had the time or expertise to take on the project myself. And so that is why I submit the project. So that's a plug for the Innovation Award to submit the project. And so next, Ashley, did you want me to demo the card, or were you going to do that?
If you could, yes.
Okay, I think I can do that. Let me just see here. Sorry for the infinity screen there for a second. And we'll just jump onto... Jump into my record, because there's nothing here that you can't really see. So it does take a second to load. And when you first add these cards or these add-ins in, it will typically show up all the way at the bottom, way down here. I have moved mine up, and hopefully here it is. So here's the card. What I'm just going to do is add a fake email in here. With some information. I'll hit submit. And so you'll see down in the corner that the data update has been accepted. It takes a little while to kind of run through and actually make that update. So maybe I will just talk for a second while I have to refresh my page.
Well, I can share a little bit too. Like, so on the card itself, so what you're seeing here, it looks like one card, but it's actually 5. So the initial card is just what shows like the add, update, remove. And then there's 4 actions or 4 buttons, if you have any familiarity with adaptive cards, that are executing another show card action. And then each of those are what ends up showing the different pieces, whether you want to update an address or a phone or an email. So talk a little bit more about that as we get into some of the other pieces, but this is just a good opportunity to kind of see how all of that actually works together.
All right, I'm going to refresh this again and see if the update worked, if our live demo works here. There we are. So you can kind of see that it put this new one in. It moved the one that was email 1 and put that to email 2, and the other one has been inactivated, so removed from my record. So that's a bit of our live demo, and I think I'll go back to the slides now. So, oops. Did you want to be here or the next one?
Yeah, we can go ahead and go into the next one. So I kind of explained this while we're waiting on the refresh, but just looking at that opportunity to show the difference and having that show card availability. So as you can kind of guess here from seeing that real-time demo, the end-to-end process is that someone is actually submitting the card. That data first is going into SharePoint. So that's why we do see somewhat of a delay as opposed to it going, making the update directly onto the record. And then there's a flow where it's being triggered once an item is added to SharePoint that it is then going through and making those updates in Razor's Edge NXT. So, there would be an opportunity here in the middle part of when it's saved to SharePoint, if you wanted to build in some kind of approval step. So if you didn't want to just see it automatically go through, but you did want someone to have an opportunity to review it, either to just say approved or to just review the data itself, you could use that to build in a secondary step to allow that. I'm seeing a question over here in chat. Yeah, so Becky, that's exactly what I was just saying. It is possible to have the changes go in there before they're automatically sent over to RE NXT. That would just be adding that secondary step within the SharePoint step there. And do folks have to have add, update, remove permissions in order to use the card? No. Yeah. So if we needed to build in additional checks, we could have done something to say, afterwards, does this person have that permission and so forth. But the point of this is to assume that everyone's going to have that access to do these. And it removes that the issue of people not having the appropriate RE permission to do that task. So based off of the logic that was built into the process for when it's making the updates into Razor's Edge, that was able to account for a lot of the issues that would come from somebody who may not normally have the correct permissions because they might not do everything exactly right. So being able to build that logic into the flow, it was able to allow the people, as long as they can see that card, just send their update through.
Ashley, one other question that Haley asked. With regard to Sky UX Designer, would Sky UX Designer be a tool to replace adaptive cards or to complement them?
No, because Sky UX is you're able to really get into heavy code there to make sure something is looking as it needs to per the Sky UX design guidelines. Adaptive cards have very limited ability to have it format and display in certain ways. It does kind of follow, there's some like natural UX design, it just follows by nature, but for the most part, it is just a kind of a very bland canvas. So unfortunately, no. All right, I think we can go to the next slide. So one of the first things with this, with the project, was to decide whether this should be a power app or an adaptive card. Really wanted it to be an adaptive card, just from the offset, but it was one of those things that kind of had to be considered. So the main benefit with adaptive cards is it doesn't have the additional licensing that is needed in order to be able to show RE data within the card. So when you're doing for the option to either update or remove, in the part that you're updating, you can choose the record or like the email address that you want to update or remove. The ability to do that within a Power App would have required that each user viewing the card would have a premium Power App license. But in adaptive cards, we can actually display that data, and there's not any no additional licensing for people outside of the licensing and the one Power Automate flow that's powering the card.
And does that include SharePoint license as well, Ashley? There was a question.
No. Well, I can't imagine that you would probably have a premium license that doesn't have some kind of like lingering SharePoint licensing. But technically, you could get a standalone Power Apps license or Power Automate like one-off license and not have any SharePoint licensing. So no, they are separate, but normally that's built into other Microsoft licensing for people.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And then so one of the benefits though of Power Apps does have more formatting options and more data input controls. So if we wanted to, prevent someone from putting a certain type of text into a field, you can do that a lot easier on the Power App side. On the adaptive card side, it doesn't really have as many of those options, but you can still account for most of those scenarios on the Power Automate Flow side, handling it within just what's actually processing the update. So not too much of a loss there. And then it does have a really easy drag and drop editor to just, when you're getting new to adaptive cards, or even when you're maybe not super new, it's still the easiest way to actually start building one out. All right. And yeah, so this is a quick screenshot of that drag and drop interface. So this is something that there's no licensing required to go to this website. Anybody can go here and start playing with it right now. But it is just adaptivecards.io/designer. And from there, you can start working with pre-built templates that the adaptive card group has put out there, or you can just start out with a blank interface and just drag and drop the pieces that you want to see. And then you can kind of start building out your own card to figure out how that should look. And then, yes, good point, Carol. So what the big thing with that adaptive card designer, what that'll do for you, you're going to drag and drop it into place and make it visually look how you want. But then in the background, what that's doing is actually building out the underlying JSON. And that's going to be the most important part that you need to actually put into the flow that surfaces the card into RE. And then with using an adaptive card, there are 2 Microsoft certified templates that I wanted to call out available from make.powerautomate.com. So if you go to make.powerautomate.com and then to the templates section, both of these exact templates were used in the making of this process. So, for a lot of it, we had to get into custom logic and custom actions to, get it to meet the exact requirements for Bennington. But at least to initially start, me and Holly McCain from BBE, who was working on this with us, we started from these same templates. So highly recommend everyone to test these out and take a look at them as well. And Pamela, I'll get a copy of that link over in the chat with you all in just a second. All right. And so we've talked about most of these already in some nature or another. But everything going into this is, there's one adaptive card. It's not really a standalone thing because you kind of have to have it powered by Power Automate Flow or something else. But within that card, it does have those 4 additional sub cards. So it's almost like there was really like 5 cards that were supporting this. And then 3 different, Power Automate flows. One to initially host and display the card, another one to get the data from what was submitted into the SharePoint list, and then another to get the data from SharePoint and into RE. And it's in that last one that we're going through and doing any other logic or processing steps to make sure that it is following the rules that it needs to be able to get into RE in an automated way. And then, as I mentioned before, the SharePoint list, it's just used for an audit trail here, really. So talk about a couple of the issues that came up. So one of the things that, with some of the limitations with an adaptive card is that it's not very easy to have like conditional logic to say that you only want something to happen when something else has happened before it. There are some scenarios where you can kind of work that in there, but for the most part, it doesn't always work super well. So here, if somebody was selecting to add a new address or new email address, then for the existing email field there, we don't want anyone to select data because since they're adding something new, they don't need to select the existing record that they want to update or remove. So if we go to the next slide. Our options were to either add some kind of tooltip text at the top or to create additional show cards. So just to due to the overall kind of nature of what we needed here, felt that going with the tooltip text at the top, which is just telling them, adding some notes in there as to when to select that field was the easier way to go. But if, Dan was finding that a lot of people weren't following along with that, or just, there was just a lot of issues or errors, then another option would have been to create additional cards that would have displayed that we could have controlled that logic with. So would have been like, instead of at the beginning when you chose, you just had the add, update, remove, and then the 4 options, choosing add would have shown its additional options that you could have then built out further, and then update, remove would have shown additional ones there. So you could have added that conditional logic in just by having additional cards created. And then some date challenges. So this is something that Holly encountered a couple different times as she was working through everything. For the most part, date fields are just a single string like we see on the left-hand side. But when you're working with fuzzy dates, it becomes a date object because you're not required to pass through both the month, day, and year at the same time. So you actually have different elements that you can pass through each of those fields. So just not having her being a little bit newer to that side of it when you first encounter that, that's always a big gotcha for everybody. So I just wanted to kind of call that out here.
Okay. So oops. I feel like I'm echoing. I think I should be good now. So the results by the numbers, how did this work out? And a little bit, I should also say that, well, Ashley and Holly were hard at work building. I decided to add a few more into the process of updates that could be completed. And so this is where some numbers come in. But we have 10, what I like to call data update champions. Really, that's just people who are making updates. And that's up from 2. So obviously a lot more people taking part. We built 8 new flows. We had 3 builders, Ashley, Holly, and myself. There are 2 adaptive card Sky add-ins. 1 completely automated process, 1 Power BI report, and most importantly, 1 entertained database manager, which would be me. So the results. What I'm going to do is actually do a bit of, I'm going to take you right into the Power BI report. So I'm going to try to drag this over and see if that works. Oops. So I think you can see that. Just stop me if you can't for some reason. So I wanted to have a little fun. So I made a bit of a carousel of the people who made updates. I stole them from our website, but I called it a choose your own adventure. So in here you can see that we have several, and I'll just go through there. So show me the data. Takes you to the next page. These are like student status updates that we get from like our dean's office or our registrar's office. If somebody goes on leave, if they've come back or if they withdraw. And what's happening with these processes, and we'll get back, you'll be like, wait a minute, I thought you were doing data updates like email and stuff like that. We'll get there. But a key thing that I've been able to do here is capture who's completing the updates. This is actually a Sky add-in that people get from a student's record. They can say what type of change, put in just a couple pieces of information, hit submit. That will update both the student record and then any connected parent records. So as you can see, we only have 1 person doing those updates, but it's saved us quite a bit of time so far. One of the next processes that I added in was staff and faculty updates, whether they were new staff and faculty or people who are leaving separated, if you will. And so this is more, you can see that a few more people did updates here, but this just made it a lot easier. You only had to enter pretty much the information that came in the email that we would receive. And then everything else would run in the background once a day to make the updates, whether that's adding a new record, downgrading one, or saying, hey, there's a duplicate here. Don't, take a look at it manually. This is the one process that we're able to completely automate. We get name and pronoun updates that are collected actually into a Google Sheet. Again, our dean's like registrar's office collects this information. And once a day, like 1 a.m, it will pick up information off of a flow will pick up information off of the sheet and make the appropriate updates to both the student record and or the parent records, depending on the situation. So no names here, just a bunch of time savings. And then what you've all been waiting for. So the adoption of this adaptive card that we showed you. You can see that I did quite a bit of testing in there, and also some updates. But we have had a lot of people try this out. Some people are in our office, some people are not in our office, but they do have access to Razor's Edge, and occasionally get updates. You can see that address and email updates are the most popular. But this is just kind of a way to show the adoption and the number of updates to complete. And the final thing that I did was I created a summary of, okay, these flows, how are we saving time? I think all the time we see, visit counts, dollar amounts, all these metrics for more frontline fundraisers, and there's not necessarily ones for the database managers. And so this is something that I hope to, kind of build on as we can, but also create maybe a state of the database report at some point. So we are going to jump back now into what I learned. What I learned is there's a lot of opportunities to automate work. And there's a lot of ways that can be a combination of manual processes or completely automated ones. It's just kind of depending on what you want to do. I did also find that it's hard to make a completely intuitive and streamlined process. The adaptive card, as Ashley kind of mentioned, some of the issues around whether you need to put in an existing address or not, and the language, the terminology of add versus update was a little bit confusing for some users who weren't doing this stuff every day. And so what I did for that was added a little splash of AI. There's a conversation in the Blackbaud community about recording processes, like screen recording processes for process instructions, like a manual. And so one of the tools was Scribe. You can do it, I think, up to 10 for free. And so I just went through and did all of this. It recorded the screenshots. I can edit the text here. I can add steps, but it shows all kinds of information where you clicked. You can put in, if you're adding a new address, phone number, email, you do not select anything, because this down here, an existing address should not be selected when adding a new address, was not clear enough, I think. And so this is, a bit of AI that we got in here, with a little bit of human control as well. So with that, are there any questions?
Thank you, Dan and Ashley. There have been some questions in the Q&A. Ashley's been answering several of them. But Dan, there are some questions to you as well.
Sure.
So first off, from Tioga, how did your team react to this, Dan, if you've launched this interactive card?
Yeah, I think most people thought it was cool. And then I think, really, honestly, it's the reminding them that it's there. Oftentimes people don't remember. They're not used to doing those updates. And so a little bit, I also had to remember, if somebody emails me and says, oh, hey, here's a new email address, I can say, actually, you have the ability to do that yourself. Here you go. Now I can send along those scribe instructions as a little bit of a guide for folks when I'm doing that. So.
Great. Thank you. Carol wants to know, when you're doing address changes, do you have the address accelerator and do you run that in batch mode?
We don't. I don't think we have the NCOA run, every quarter. That's about all that we do with them.
Okay, great. Kelly's curious, how did you calculate your time savings?
So what I did was just kind of do the process myself as it was if I was doing all the steps, all the manual steps. And then I would do the same process with, the new flows and the automations, and kind of compare that. And then what I did, and Ashley suggested, I skipped over this. This was a good suggestion, but so in all of these flows, the one that Ashley and Holly built, all of this information lands in a SharePoint list. And so I can pull that, say what type of update it is, things of that nature, so that I can pull that and use that as a data source in Power BI. A lot of the other ones, I'm putting that, kind of depositing it on a Excel sheet that is an Excel Online sheet that says, who's doing the update, what type of update. And then I have a lookup table that essentially just does a VLOOKUP that runs down to say how many minutes, hours, are saved with each action. And that's how I calculate it. Bit of a long-winded answer.
Great. Thanks so much. And then another question for the scribe guide that you created. Where did you place the guide for users to access it?
It's actually, I only did that like maybe a few weeks ago. So I will probably put it, we have like an advancement services Google site with a lot of process instructions. I may also change the text, the help text, a little bit to include a link to it. Because that, I think, would be a helpful information just to put right on that card.
Fantastic. I think that's all the questions that have been submitted. Are there any others that anyone would like to ask?
Yeah, fire away. And I will say, just shameless plug for the Innovation Award. I was just like, I'll record something real quick, and here I am. So feel free to do it. Ashley is great to work with. It's my second time working with her, so that's been a lot of fun. And I know people were singing her praises in other sessions yesterday. So feel privileged and honored to be able to present with her and work on this together.
Well, thank you, Dan. I really appreciate that. It's been great working with you as well. To go along with that shameless Innovation Grant Award plug, though, if you wouldn't mind stopping to share your screen. I think we actually have a slide in here that I can throw on so that if anybody's curious, how can you submit your own? Go ahead and just scan that QR code there, and it'll take you to exactly where you need to go to submit for your own Innovation Grant Award. You have to record a short video. I think it's, maybe like a minute or whatever. They just want to hear it from your words as opposed to something written as to what your idea is. This year, though, it is slightly different. So instead of getting partnered with Blackbaud, we are partnering with other partners. So NP Automate, Microsoft, and Sentinel Consulting would be who you would get to work with this year on those Innovation Grant Awards. So a great opportunity to work with some of our other partners and to really just, bring your idea to life.
Dan, there was one additional question from Kelly. What was your background in power tools prior to taking this one on?
So I've used Power BI probably since 2017. But then Power Automate, I think, about 3 years. So I had built an adaptive card myself, with some of the guides from Ben Lambert that make the rounds in community and are really fantastic. But so I have had some experience. The adaptive card building part was really, I would have really very limited idea of what to do. So glad to work with Ashley on that. I could build some basic things that really just look like a form. But the kind of the nesting, if you will, of cards was certainly not in my skill set, and still probably is not. So.
But this has been shared. I think it was just yesterday, Dan shared a link out to this project itself out on the community. I put that link into the Q&A chat, but I can share it over here as well in the main chat. So if any of you are interested, this is available as is today for anyone to be able to download and start working with and making it your own.
Yep. Yeah, because your logic for updates is going to be different. And you may also not be, I don't know if daring is quite the right word to say, to let the changes go right in. You might want to have a little more control over that. And I think there's just a simple way that you could insert that at the SharePoint list point that Ashley mentioned, to just put in something so somebody could say, yes, approved, and then it would process. So.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for all the comments and love in the chat. I'm going to launch the survey. Just a reminder that we can give Dan and Ashley that golden ticket to Seattle at BBCon in September with stellar ratings. This has been a really fascinating project, and it's great to see that you went the extra mile and develop some metrics around how it's been used and the value that it's brought your organization. So that's
and I should also credit Heather McLean, because that was her idea. So it was, and I was like, oh, how am I going to do that? So that was fun part for me. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, well, a big thanks to Dan and Ashley for sharing today, and please again rate the presentation highly, and enjoy the remainder of the Dev Days experience.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.